we'll just run through the fire procedures. If you could all bear with me this evening, I have major surgery on Friday, so I'm not actually meant to be here, and my husband still thinks I'm at home, so it's a good job we've worked long hours. So just please bear with me, and we will get through this. So fire procedures. In case of an emergency, there are no planned fire drills during this meeting. If you hear the fire alarm sound, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest escape route is via the stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building and walk across the inner car park to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. The lifts can't be used in the event of an emergency. Please do not re-enter the building until you're advised it's safe to do so by a member of staff. Apologies and changes of membership, if any. I've had one apology from a cabinet member who says she can't be here, but she is online, which is Councillor PC Wilcox.
Councillor Stewart is
substituting for Councillor Lilly, but I did say if Councillor Lilly wants to come online, then he is welcome to do so as well. We can't take it into account as a member of the committee, but as the ward councillor, if he does want a few minutes to air his views, then he is most welcome to. It's quite an extraordinary meeting that we have this evening, and we need to be considerate to all. Minutes of the last meeting, if everybody could go to them. I assume there's no issues with the first page. Then what is on numbered as page 427? 427, is that okay? 428, 429, 430. Is it different wording?
Yeah, I don't know which page numbers you're referring to, but the minutes that we have with the formal agenda, I'd like to refer to page 7.
Page 7. Your page 7 is probably going to be...
Which is the paragraph just before minute number 56.
Yep.
Where there is a figure of 136%. That is inaccurate. It was 130%. Quite important because 6% represents over £40 million. Thank you, Chair. Can that be corrected?
Yep. Thank you. Can that be corrected to the minutes, please? Everybody else okay with the minutes? Can I still sign them even though there's a change? Yes. Okay. Okay, bear with. So you'll know the running of this evening, and thank you so many people coming to the public gallery this evening. We will allow public question time, but I think because it's on such an important issue and all the questions that I've seen have come in on school place planning, then I would like to suspend the procedural rule part 4B section 15 to extend the time for public questions. Is everybody happy with that on the committee? Thank you. So where you see that it says 15 minutes, we've suspended that, and we'll basically go with as long as people really need within reason to ask questions.
Chair, could I make a request, please? We've got a number of public questions here. It seems to have become the practice at this meeting in recent times. The public questions are answered by officers of this council. I think the cabinet members should be held more responsible for these things, and therefore I think Councillor Bacon should be the prime person the questions are referred to. Would you agree?
I'm quite happy with that. When I was a cabinet member, I would always answer the questions first. If there was something about data and things like that that I needed to refer to, then I would refer to an officer. So I do agree it should be the cabinet member that responds firstly, but if there's something about data or really technical, then I would expect you then to refer to the officers. Thank you. We need to do declarations of interest to invite councillors to declare any interest they might have in the matters on the agenda. No, are we all happy? Right, for public questions, what I'm going to do, we've had quite a few written questions. So what I'm going to do is ask if the people have written a question, would like to come up, if they are up in the public gallery, you get the opportunity to come and read that question out and we can have it answered for you. If they're not here, then I will read it and we'll ask for that to be a written reply. Is everybody happy with that? So the first question we've got this evening is from a Miss Amy Martindale. Is Miss Amy Martindale here? Okay, what I'll do is when you come up to the front and you press the red button. I turn my microphone off and you turn yours on, and just speak slightly away from the microphone, otherwise we'll get feedback. So if you'd like to come and ask your first question.
Good evening. So I'd like to inquire about the following previously. You indicated that children from God's Hill will be offered places at Knighton or St Francis or in an alternative school. However, in previous meetings, when this was questioned, you stated you could not guarantee this and the discussions with the schools to increase the capacity hadn't taken place. Now you stated in your document that you released this week that all children currently at God's Hill will be offered school places at one of these two schools. Will this be guaranteed for the siblings remaining together? And have you discussed this with our mission team to ensure this is feasible?
Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. Bear with me. I haven't actually been provided with printed copies of the answers, so I'm hoping technology will hold out. Oh, thank you very much. That's easier. Yes, the response is this. Should Cabinet provide approval to proceed with the closure of God's Hill Primary School, the local authority would work with parents of children where God's Hill Primary School is the child's nearest school to ensure that a school place is made available within the planning area. Early discussions have taken place with St Francis Primary School and Knighton Primary School. Due to the high percentage of children living outside of the planning area, the local authority would also work with parents and carers to understand if they would prefer a school closer to their home address. If Cabinet provides approval to proceed with the statutory notices, further information will be shared on where school places are available.
Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. So the supplementary question is, currently there's no spaces at either schools or waiting lists are now being made by the admissions team. With St Francis document in previous meetings by the Academy Trust, they're not increasing the PAN numbers. If you can't force them to close, how can you force them to increase their PAN numbers? Where exactly are the children of God's Hill are meant to go? Your actual document that you produced this week says the children will be offered, all children will be offered a place at St Francis or Knighton.
Councillor Bacon.
I think we're now getting into operational matters, so I would look behind me for assistance on the answer to this.
Thank you, Mr Whitaker.
Thank you for your questions. So the discussions have started and will continue with schools on the island, both academies and maintained schools, about where children are able to attend going forward should proposals progress. As Councillor Bacon alluded to in the answer to your first question, there are a significant number of families who currently choose to travel from other areas on the island to go to school in God's Hill. And because of the significant impact of parental choice, at this stage, it's not possible to be exact in saying where children will go in the future, because the choice that parents have in that position is significant, and we would look to work with families to make sure that their preferences were met where possible, and if that wasn't possible, to work within the statutory duties that the council has to make an appropriate school place available for them. And I just emphasise the point that this is a situation which we're working with all schools on, and will continue to work with all schools on, in terms of
providing appropriate education for all island children. And we are very pleased with the engagement that we have with senior leaders across all primary schools in working together in the shared best interests of island children.
Thank you. Can I just make it clear to the public gallery, just to reiterate that you've come to corporate scrutiny this evening, and this is the place where we as councillors are not on the cabinet. So the cabinet is sat over this side, and the councillors are sat over the other side. So our role as corporate scrutiny is to question these decisions, to act as a critical friend. So you've got a very open environment here to ask these questions. So it should be hopefully quite reasonably comfortable environment for you to ask questions in. And if it doesn't get like that, then put your hand up and wave at me. The second question is from a Sarah Mitchell of Godsill to the. Thank you.
If the decision for closure is not finalised until February, March, how will you manage the parental preference timeline to allow parents to view schools, submit applications, and then you yourself have time to process these options? After this, you have then said there'll be time for settling in sessions and teacher meets. This is expected at an already busy time of year for teachers and administration staff. Can you provide a more detailed timeline for this part of the process?
Thank you. I'll refer that to Councillor Bacon.
The written response is as follows. Should a decision be taken to close a school, during the spring term, parents of any schools proposed for closure would be requested to confirm whether they wish for a place at the proposed successor school or whether they wish to preference an alternative school. This process would enable effective collaboration between the closing school and the school or schools that pupils are transferring to during the summer term 2025, so that the transition is smooth. We absolutely understand that the well-being and transition of the children is going to need careful planning and consideration throughout this process. And please be assured that if any decisions are taken to close schools, we will be working closely with schools, parents and carers and any other required agency to support a smooth transition for all children.
Do you have a supplementary?
Not a question, but I do have concerns about the time frame, regarding that
I
and actually the manageability, but
So-
not a council question.
So lots of that stuff will be taken up because once we finish the public questions, the scrutiny committee will, you'll see they're all scribbling down and taking notes. So if they're not happy with an answer, we will then ask further questions and delve deeper into it. So we'll make sure that one of the councillors actually asks one of those questions and questions deeper on the timeline.
Thank you.
Second question is from a Joseph Leopard of Godsill. No? We'll make sure that is a written reply. Next question, Harley Murphy of Lake. No. Yvette Leopard of Godsill. Thank you.
Hello. Your anticipated travel costs for the closure of Godsill Primary School alone is more than the combined costs for the other 5 schools on the list, which is in the public document pack on page 22. I have a written response from your team from the 17th of October that states primary age children requiring transport and given public transport would be allowed a parent pass to travel with them. However, I cannot find any mention in that document that additional accompanying adults have been included in the calculations, which would also then further increase these already high figures. How do you justify such a huge cost to the council when Godsill School itself isn't yet in debt?
Councillor Bacon.
Council recognise that one of the implications of identifying a rural school for closure is the possible increase in transport costs. However, currently the primary schools alone are forecast to spend 2.6 million more than they receive in income. The ongoing trend indicates that by March 2027, 22 primary schools may face budget deficits, potentially amounting to a cumulative figure of 7.4 million or more. As per summer term submission, Godsill Primary School has a cumulative forecast budget deficit of £150,000. and this is likely to increase to 166,000 by the end of the financial year 2024-2025. Surplus places is a significant factor in these budget pressures for schools and therefore is a matter that should be addressed.
Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I just wanted to say that there has been numerous new children join Godshill Primary School as well since September. So obviously the new kids that are still joining, even this week we've had new children, they would also then need additional travel costs. And at what point does that then get recalculated?
Councillor Bacon, I'll refer to you.
Well, I think the point to make is that the recalculation is ongoing in that regard. However, the figures in relation to the anticipated deficit are fairly clear. So any increase in pupil numbers would have to be balanced against that deficit, as the answer suggested.
Thank you. The next question is from Diane Barker, Chair of Governors at Godshill Primary School. Kate Green of Wroxall. Ian Barker of Godshill. Kerry Matson. The written questions. So we go on to people who've registered to ask a verbal question. And the first is from a Nicholas Binfield of Brading.
So we have significant concerns at Brading regarding the use of the planning areas. The planning areas could be considered to be significantly out of date, and in the intervening time period, significant demographic changes having taken place. Councillor Bacon has assured me on an email on the 26th of September, which is available to any councillor member that wishes to see that these planning areas would in no way, shape or form be used to produce conclusions. Yet the 5 viable alternatives put together by the Brading Community Partnership and Save Brading School have in a large part been rejected because in the authors of the document's opinion, they don't provide the required place savings in the Sandown Bay planning area. So could we please consider that this process is stopped, halted, or as a minimum suspended, considering the very significant concerns, omissions and inaccuracies in the document and information provided to the general public?
Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. I don't accept that there are inaccuracies. As I said in my response to Mr. Binfield, which I recall, and as I was planning on saying on Thursday night, and I'm sure it will come up again today, the planning areas were not used as part of the selection process. They are used as a way to present data. The place savings in terms of numbers, surplus places, are considered overall. This is a whole island exercise. I agree entirely that the place planning areas are not good. It was considered last year whether it would be a worthwhile exercise to undertake a full review of those planning areas. And to be blunt, it was felt to be a waste of time and money, because whatever we would be left with, we have to have place planning areas, it's a statutory requirement, but they're not particularly helpful. And we did not think that going through a long-winded exercise to review and rewrite those areas would achieve much, either in terms of the areas or in terms of helping the process which we anticipated was coming forward. So I would reiterate that, as I said before, and I've said on a number of occasions, the planning areas are used as a way of presenting data because they are there, they serve that purpose, but they did not form the basis of the consideration either of the original proposals or of the consideration which has taken place of submitted alternative proposals.
Mr. Binfield, do you have a supplementary question?
Many, but I'll limit it to one. So Councillor Bacon refers to the fact that there are no inaccuracies in the report. That is materially not the case. one of the braiding proposals has not been considered appropriately because it has been mislabeled as similar to one of the other proposals that we've put forward. That is a material, would have expected that for transparency, that the Isle of Wight Council would have ensured that they had up-to-date planning areas. In addition to that, Councillor Bacon has just gone on record in this chamber as saying that the planning areas in no way, shape or form affected conclusions drawn. That in the report is blatantly not the
You
case.
do have to make sure that you stick to a question.
Okay, apologies.
Thank you. It's very much becoming a statement.
Okay, sorry. Could Councillor Bacon explain then to the gallery how Brading's proposals have been rejected based around planning areas?
They are not rejected, and nothing is rejected yet because Cabinet is still to undertake this consideration in public on Thursday. So I think that needs to be made clear. Recommendations have been put forward and an analysis has been put forward, and that appears very clearly in the documentation that has been generated and publicly available since last week. I would also note that Mr. Binfield actually made this point in an email, I think it was over the weekend, possibly Friday, and forwarded the braiding documentation again, as he believed it had not been properly presented. I have circulated that amongst my fellow Cabinet members with an instruction for them to read it. So I would assure him that when we come to consider matters on Thursday, the information that, as he sees as needing to be presented, has been presented and put in front of Cabinet members in that form for consideration, and will be what we look at on Thursday.
Thank you. Jen Hughes from Ryde.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mrs. Jen Hughes and I'm a parent representative of Oakfield Primary School. So during a scheduled meeting with Ashley Whitaker, Jake Kennett and myself on the 24th of October of this year, I asked the question regarding the cost of building a new SEND school to the council, to which the answer given was 25 million plus. As no set criteria has been identified and implemented in the identification of schools for closure by the Isle of Wight Council, has Oakfield been chosen for the reasons identified on page 26, excuse me, of the school place planning proposals, that the Oakfield site would, and I quote, provide a modern, fit for purpose accommodation that is compliant with the Disability Discrimination Act. So to summarise, my question is, has our school been identified for closure because the Isle of Wight Council would like to save themselves circa 25 million and the hassle of building a SEND provision in the ultimate act of cuckooing by taking over our school?
I like that expression. I'm going to keep that for myself one day. Councillor Bacon.
I think a lot of confusion has arisen through the initial discussion about potential alternate uses for school sites, and it has clouded the fundamental issues here. So as it says in the presentation of proposals for all the schools that is being put before Cabinet on Thursday, for the purpose of this appears in relation to all the schools in the analysis. For the purpose of this paper, the future of the school site will not be considered. It is not a relevant consideration for this process.
I do need to remind everybody that you need to make sure that no challenges from the gallery. You do get your time to talk, but everybody needs to treat everybody with respect here. Do you have a supplementary question?
Unsurprisingly, yes, I do. First off, I don't feel you answered the question. I think that was a good sideswipe to it. But what I would like to say now is we feel that the stakeholders have not been properly consulted, as is alluded to in their responses to the recent release of the data that you have collated. There is no evidence of continuity in criteria by which schools were identified for closure, and that a decision should be based on a proper consultative process. And this is not a complete consultation. We feel the data has been cherry-picked and pertinent points raised during the consultation process ignored. And given that Cllr are pushing for a judicial review and the legal ramifications of carrying forward their closure, this would undermine the entire report and only lead to the conclusion the report should be withdrawn. So to summarise on these points, my question is, as due and fair process seems to have not been followed, there is no set criteria. Do the Cabinet really, or the members proposing this, really feel that we have enough information for the decision makers to consider in a fair process to be able to carry this to a vote on Thursday? Because in my, what I can see with all of this, there is not enough complete data to make a fair decision on Thursday, so it should be withdrawn.
Councillor Bacon.
I'm afraid I think you will probably find my answer predictable, but the consideration is that a due and fair process has been considered. I don't want to preempt the Cabinet's consideration in any way, but I believe that will be the finding of Cabinet, and that the Cabinet has sufficient information, that's my bundle, to make determinations and decisions in this matter.
Thank you. Can Sam Pickard of Cowes?
Good evening. I stand here again to make the same point that I have done previously with regards to Cowes Primary. And the proposal that we, the friends and family of Cowes, made, which is that you should also include the failing academies. But again, as I see it, this council continues to hide behind the statement that it has no legal authority to close academies. Even Councillor Bacon within this room stated that decisions may have been different if you had that power. And yet when I read the documentation that you share, I can see that the Department for Education promotes a framework for collaboration, working between trusts and local authorities. Northwood Primary School Academy Trust were committed to engage fully and without reservation. And the council itself said it should be a school type neutral approach. So
can we lead to a question, please?
Yeah, all of these suggest that there's a fair approach that can be taken. So does this council feel confident that it has fully engaged with the local authority and the schools in order to make the right decision on behalf of the children and their education, and is not just taking a quick decision to save face from previous failures?
Councillor Bacon.
It has not been a quick process. I was asked to take on this role last October. I think I've been dealing with this every day since. And there has been extensive process of engagement and extensive consultation, extensive work and consideration. So I don't think one could call this a quick process in any way. I would, however, say that we have engaged to the full extent of the powers we have. The point about academies has been raised time and time again. There are numerous documents in the appendices that have been provided that show what has been done, and the fact that academies have chosen not to engage either with the council or with the DFE, who have made approaches as well. And that is the state of the law at the moment. You don't like it, I don't like it, but we have to act to deal with a very serious problem to the extent, within the extent of the powers we have. And that is what has been done in this process.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, just one follow-up. In which case, can we not wait, or can you not wait for the Children's Wellbeing Bill to be passed by Labour, which should give you more control over this decision-making process?
That would be nice if we could, but we have spoken, as I say, with the Regional Schools Commissioner, with the DFE. We don't have a timetable for when that is coming forward, yet we have a problem at the moment where the island currently has, I was going to give these figures in relation to one of the written questions before, but the island has 10,724 primary school places. But over the next few years, that's going to drop to it's 7,640, if I'm reading the figures correctly. And that is going to create significant financial problems. As I did say earlier, the budget deficit in relation to schools, the expenditure necessary over funds that are there is going to potentially total over £7.4 million. That means that children are not going to be able to receive a properly funded education. At the root of this is being able to provide a quality education for children. The existence of surplus places in the system simply prevents that from happening. The island is already at the bottom of the tables for education performance on the island. I would ask people, if they haven't looked at it, to look at Appendix 25, the LGA report that was undertaken on this process a couple of months ago, which makes for stark reading, but makes that situation very clear from an independent viewpoint. We can't wait any longer, waited long enough. I would like to be able to have a situation where we have equal power over all schools, but the situation we have at the moment doesn't give us that, but it also, the situation we're given does not give us the luxury of being able to wait any longer to take action.
Thank you. So we have one more question from the public gallery, and then we will move to councillors. To Brian Tyndall of Brading. There are more questions up there, then put your hands up. I'm not going to move straight over. You've all taken the time to come, and this is a very important, for all of you. Brian Tyndall.
That's it. Okay. Right. In the original school place planning document, excuse me, there was a section for Ryde Rural, and under that section there was a summary and a proposal. The summary said, Ryde Rural is, due to its isolated nature, accommodates small numbers of children, which translate to a large percent of surplus when compared to the places available. The number of children living in the immediate area is much lower than the number of children choosing to attend the schools, suggesting the schools are serving outside of the planning area. So that means parents are bringing their children from other areas into the Ryde neutral. The proposal, this original one, said review to be undertaken to establish the future viability of the schools in area given the level of children opting to travel into the planning area. This phrase, which I copied, was actually changed at a later date for something else. But what it was saying gives the impression that the schools in Ryde Rural will be treated separately and differently from other schools in the school place planning. No full explanation of this different treatment and no date for such a review, which was to establish the future viability of these schools, was given. If the same criteria for school place planning was used for one or both of these Ryde Rural schools, it could have been considered for closure. With these low local pupil numbers, the children from Ryde Rural could be transferred to other schools selected for closure. So some of the schools chosen for closure may have been allowed to remain open. My question is, why these schools were not chosen to be part of the school place planning, especially as they fulfill the same criteria as those schools selected for closure?
Councillor Bacon, before you answer that question, can I remind people of the rules that we had at the previous meeting, that please don't mention any other schools by name when you're discussing this. Please make it very broad. It's not fair to actually name other schools when discussing this, please. Just to remind everybody and when asking questions.
Thank you for that, Chair. I think I simply repeat a comment I made earlier, that the selection process undertaken was a whole island exercise. It was not done on the basis of place planning areas. All schools were considered, including academies at that first stage, although of course they excluded themselves from the system subsequently. So the simple answer is it was a whole island process. All schools were looked at.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary question?
sorry. Just as well. I do have a supplementary. You mentioned it wasn't part of school place planning, but the document was called school place planning, so it should have been part of it. And I can't understand your reasoning, and I don't accept your reasoning for what you've just said.
Thank you. Councillor Bacon.
I'm not sure that was a question, more a comment. The reasoning is sought to be set out in all the documentation. So perhaps I'm sorry, I'm struggling to understand what the question is. I think I've answered the question that a whole island approach was taken to initially select a list of schools to enter on into a consultation process, which has then subsequently happened. I'm not sure I understand further the question to answer anymore.
I think that's fine because we've got other people who need to ask questions. So I do have Jeff Williams has put his hand up and Rob from the diocese. Do you mind if we take the public questions and we lead you into when the councillors start to debate that? If you could hold fire a little bit. I've seen your hands up. It's fine. We had other questions from the public gallery. Anybody else got a question? The lady was definitely going to stand up. Yes, thank you. Can you introduce yourself because I don't have the details of your name here.
I'm Vicky Reader, I'm head teacher of Oatfield Primary School. Right now, there are 6 schools, hundreds of children, staff and families who are counting on the Isle of Wight councillors to make the right decision by recognising the flawed process of procedures that have led to this point. We acknowledge that there are surplus places on the island, but addressing this is a really high-stake decision, and therefore, as a minimum, the island community deserves for councillors to be factually informed and confident that the correct policies and procedures have been followed. One could ask how councillors can begin to make a financially driven decision based upon reports that do not include essential costings and impact. However, my one question is, can councillors honestly say that they are 100% confident of all of the information that has been presented to them is both fair and factually accurate? The 6 schools have strong evidence against this. A couple of small examples. Oatfield, it states, has 26 teachers. I wish we did. We have 8. And 30 plus teaching assistants. I wish we did. We have 16. It is essential that Isle of Wight councillors make an informed decision because and also take into consideration whilst Jonathan Bacon has said that the use of school buildings is no longer going to be considered. A question is, but could that have influenced the responses? We think so very much, and therefore, does that not make the responses invalid? I urge Isle of Wight councillors, if you are in any doubt, to live out the Isle of Wight Council Code of Conduct by showing selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty and leadership. The hard part isn't making the wrong decision, it is living with the consequences of that decision.
Thank you. Before I bring Councillor Bacon in to answer this, I will reiterate that this is a cabinet decision. So there are 39 councillors and there are only 8 cabinet members. I have been a cabinet member in the past and I can tell you it is not an easy job at all. It is really, really difficult. Hence why we're moving to a committee system from May 2025 because it becomes a more shared decision. So the councillors here who are questioning this as scrutiny do not ultimately make that decision. It does fall to the cabinet to make that decision. Hence why I'm handing over to Councillor Bacon and not giving you my opinion at the moment. But that will come, trust me.
And we all look forward to that. So I was expecting to go straight into my answer. I was slightly thrown by what you said there, Claire, but I think we are all very, very seized of our duty and our responsibility here. This is not an easy process for anyone. And far more difficult for those who are directly affected on the ground than those of us who sit in offices here or who are councillors in the various wards affected. If numbers are queried, please refer that to officers. I would have to, if that is a part of the question as to numbers, have to look behind me because that's very much an operational matter. But it is for each cabinet member when we make a decision on, or make decisions, whatever we do on Thursday, to have the confidence they require in the information. For my part, having looked through everything received, and stuff is still coming in. We had further bundle this afternoon, which I think was prepared partly for the benefit of the Scrutiny Committee. I am confident in the information. If anything, however, is raised that wants to query that, as happened with Mr. Binfield earlier in the email he sent at the weekend, I'll more than happily take that on board and query it as necessary, so that we make sure that when decisions arise on Thursday, they're being made on a sound basis and we are acting fully in accordance with the duty and responsibility we have as councillors.
Do you have a supplementary question?
Just a brief one. Councillor Bacon, you've referred to the evidence of how schools were identified following a Freedom of Information request question. The response was that there hadn't been a particular process that had been followed, but it was more a professional conversation between colleagues. So the question is, how can the cabinet or councillors scrutinise and look at the validity of the evidence and how the schools were identified if it doesn't exist?
The Bacon.
It's a question from the outset. Please, can we see the list of criteria? I think that the approach, no, the feeling was that if you have a single set list of criteria, you're always going to fail on that because you're never going to identify everything. The process involved looking at every relevant bit of information. Every school is different, and every one of the 6 schools that are currently within this process are different. To have a single list of criteria, I think, would inevitably prejudice one and promote another. So it has to become a matter of professional judgment being exercised by those who have the skill and knowledge to do that, taking account of every factor that officers, as it will be councillors, and indeed those who have responded to the consultation have put forward. So I think that would be my answer. Yes, there is professional judgment here. I've answered the point about the criteria numerous times during this process, but everything that is put forward that is relevant is considered.
Thank you. Does anybody else in the public gallery have a question? So I'm going to take 1, 2. There's no more hands up apart from those 2. So the gentleman there. You could introduce yourself, would be appreciated.
Yeah, look, I'm Mark. I'm a parent from one of the schools that's potential closure. Look, I understand.
Sorry, can we have your surname?
Yeah, it's Mark Atkins. Sorry.
Atkins.
Yeah, I understand. We have to. You can't overspend. I understand all that. What I'm trying to understand is, we've got a cabinet that going to decide on Thursday of 8 people from May. That's going. Why are we not using a common sense approach to something that could shape the island's future for years to come? Why are we not getting every councillor to have the vote, have their say, instead of 8 people? There's no logic behind it, to me. That's no common sense to it.
I think if you stay to the next part of the meeting, Councillor Brodie will ask that question and then it will be answered by the people who know the legalities of the reasons why.
Okay, yeah, it just feels a bit rushed to me. It feels like we're trying to do this quick.
Councillor Bacon can answer it now, though, if he wants. And you get a round of applause. Everyone deserves one. I get one.
As a former practicing lawyer, I would have to say, with my honesty hat on, that logic and law do not always coincide. We have to operate within the legal framework that we have. I've mentioned that in relation to the specific issue concerning academies earlier, but it applies here as well, in that the law as exists, this has been queried internally by a number of times, and I believe the leader is going to speak on this later, sets out where the responsibility and duty to make the decision in this process lies, and it is with Cabinet, whether one likes that or not. We can't act illegally, nor, as I said in response to an earlier question, can we delay any further. There's been too much delay in this process. I'm sure that the point is going to be made further from some quarters. We have to get on with this. The deficits that are building up are eye-watering, but more importantly than that, the fact that those deficits are mounting means that the ability to address the serious failings in our education system, we can't just keep pushing those down the road and not dealing with them. The responsibility the Cabinet has to make a decision has to be taken on board now and not later.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, look, I don't disagree with the deficit. Then hold it. Yeah, we're already in the deficit. We're already in a bit of thingy. This decision will shape the island for years to come. This could be a progressive backward step more than a forward step until we get it right. We're trying to do 6 schools at once. So I would say hold on and let us do it properly. Get everybody involved. Do it properly. Don't rush this.
I think the councillors will voice an opinion on that as we get through the meeting as well. Thank you for your question. The last question from the public gallery. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Good evening. I'm Cllr Rennie. I'm a teacher at Christ the King College. I'm joint chaplain there. I'm also president of the National Education Union for the Isle of Wight this year, a voluntary position, no interests, all to declare. It's with really heavy heart. Councillor Bacon spoke of his the feelings of people on the ground. It's with real heavy heart that I'm here this evening. It's real heavy heart that I see all these people in the gallery tonight, which maybe you don't have at lots of meetings. So to come up with a question, the gentleman that has just spoken has said that this decision is not just a decision for this year. It's actually is going to have a long-running impact on the island, Isle of Wight, the communities, and our society. I was part of campaigning against the closure of Sandown Bay when I was working at Ride Academy as part of the AET Trust. One of my fundamental reasons for opposing that being closed was I felt that the impact on the society and the communities around Sandown and the Bay would be devastating if you take away a secondary school in that area of then what you see happening in the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years going down the road. If we close 6 primary schools in the way that you're looking at doing at the moment, then you're not just impacting the school, you're impacting society. You're impacting the decisions of young people, young adults, of staying on the island maybe for bringing up their own children and employment. You're affecting, I believe, people not necessarily moving to the island. I'm putting on pause here educational standards because I don't want to bring about take inappropriate correlation between different elements here. But I think we're reducing the opportunities for young professionals or businesses and industries to move to the island with jobs and future prosperity. So I would like people to reflect in making this decision that what do you want the island to look like in 2050? And my question then,
thank you.
If there is even one issue that people have raised this evening or in writing or that the Diocese of Portsmouth brings up, that really is a significant issue, then I understand, Councillor Bacon, that there are financial issues currently. But if there's even one issue, and I would state as one issue, for example, being the proposal of God's Hill and Arraton and a rural school being appropriately considered, then we must not go forwards. It would be unprofessional and lacking in integrity if we go forwards with such a major decision on this basis. So that would be my question there really, is our cabinet, our council prepared to make a decision with such impact when due process and proper consideration of all the options has not been made? Councillor Bacon spoke about saying this has been taking a long time and we've been very busy every day. Every single teacher has been very busy every single day. And since the beginning of term has had this on their heads as well, as have head teachers, as have chairs of governors, as have learning support assistants. As a president of the NEU, I've seen the emotional impact on teachers and staff that has gone on here. So my request is to press the pause button on any significant issue that needs to be dealt with before the decision is made.
We'll hand to Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. And I hear what you say. I have commented on process already, and I'm not going to repeat myself there. I was interested to hear that I didn't quite catch the words, but you said it was something along the lines of laying educational standards to one side. I apologise if I misheard slightly, but that is exactly what we can't do. To answer this question, I did refer to the LGA report earlier. I'd like to actually just read 2 paragraphs very briefly from that report that I had read through again at the weekend, and would I'd probably say again on Thursday, but I think it's worth reading these from the, as I say, the independent review that the LGA, Local Government Association, undertook earlier this year. The challenges that the island faces are severe, in that the island's schools overall rank last for the percentage of schools judged good or outstanding by Ofsted. It should be noted, however, that one of these schools has just been judged as outstanding, which indicates that there is nothing intrinsic to the environment or child population of the Isle of Wight that prevents schools performing at the highest standard. Using this criteria, not only could the island be judged to be the worst performing local authority in England, it is also set to have more than 3,000 surplus primary school places, close to a third of the available school places. Therefore, radical action is now clearly urgently required. It is recognised that schools have very close ties to their local area and communities, which is why closing schools is a difficult decision and a last resort for a council. However, the quality of education for children and the strength of the whole school system on the Isle of Wight must take priority. Undoubtedly, this will result in significant change, which will impact on communities. Nevertheless, rightly, the Isle of Wight Council is seeking to address these interlinked issues. I think that would say all I would want to say.
You do. The gentleman behind you, was it going to be a really brief question or a massive long statement? Really short question. Okay, I know you. Yes, supplementary. I'll let you.
I'll be brief in my response. I'm not ignoring educational standards. There's just a certain time in this debate. But in terms of just one fact back at you, why are you considering then closing an Ofsted rated good school in God's Hill? And braiding, thank you. And cows. So that's 50% so far. And I've got to make a statement here. And this whole process has caused a huge amount of turbulence in the whole primary school system, with children being moved, anxiety and everything else. So I think whether it's necessary or not, I just want to make that point that this has affected educational standards on the island at the moment. And that doesn't mean to make a rushed decision. It means to make a good decision.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Bacon, and then I think Duncan waving his hand up there, and then that will be the last question from the public gallery.
I think we all recognise there's disruption. One cannot do this without causing disruption, but it is, Cabinet has to, having responsibility and the duty it has to look at the bigger picture. We recognise very much that pain, upset, distress is being caused, but as I say, as the LGA quote that I sought to read out says, there's a bigger issue here in relation to the future of those children currently in school, their wider, longer future as future adults, and the future of those children yet to enter school, and the quality of education and subsequent opportunities they will receive. And that is what is guiding certainly my thoughts, feelings and approach to this. And I trust as well those of my fellow cabinet members.
Thank you. The last question from the public gallery, and then I will do a quick sum up. Then I'm going to hand over to a ward councillor whose schools are in her area, and then I'll ask for the diocese to come in, and then we will go on to the committee's questions. Is that okay? Thank you. And it's got to be a question. I'm watching you.
It'll be a question. I'm Duncan Morrison. I'm a teacher at Arreton Primary School. I'm also the branch secretary and district secretary of the NEU. My question is, given the very, very deep concerns about what I would describe as a deeply flawed process, which has led to a deeply flawed report, would it not be appropriate to get that report and the process independently verified by educational experts outside of the current council offices?
Councillor Bacon.
Well, I've just read out the LGA. Well, I've read a paragraph from the LGA report. I would ask that you read the whole report.
Shall we let the councillors challenge that one? Because don't forget, we're all making notes and we will be challenging, so it's not going to be an easy ride. So can I hand over to Councillor Ellis, please? Because I did say as a ward councillor she could ask a question, then I'll hand to the diocese.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is regarding the presumption against the closure of rural schools, which I'm sure Councillor Bacon and the officers will all be very familiar with. So I am ward councillor for Central Rural, and Godshill and Arreton are the last two schools in Central Rural and are both on the list for closure. They're both rural schools. Bordering my ward, in Councillor Downer's ward, we also have Wroxall School on the proposed list for closure, which is also a rural school. So if I just briefly read you this from the presumption against the closure of rural schools. Proposers should be aware that the department, that's the Department of Education, expects all decision makers to adopt a presumption against the closure of rural schools. This does not mean that a rural school will never close, but that the case for closure should be strong and clearly in the best interests of educational provision in the area. So if we're talking about the central rural area of our island, please can the cabinet member or the officers demonstrate, or tell me tonight, demonstrate for everybody here, the strong and clearly in the best interests of educational provision. How is closing all three schools clearly in the best interest of educational provision in the area that we're talking about? Thank you.
Councillor Bacon, do you want me to bring the diocese on and then you answer that question, or are you happy to answer that for now?
If it's an allied question from the diocese and you think it could be
It's
combined.
fine, you can answer it now. I'm quite enjoying watching you under pressure, to be fair. Pain, you know, I'm getting my pleasure where I can at the moment.
The report that has been published seeks to set out in relation to each of the schools that has the is formally defined as a rural school. There is an analysis contained in each sub-report, and in relation to Godshill, this is on pages 154 to 157. Sorry, no, it goes on further than that, 159 of that bundle, and that seeks to set out the analysis of that. A decision hasn't been made yet. That's coming up on Thursday. So the criteria and reasoning that is put forward is contained in that report. And I could sit here and read it out, but I don't think, I think there's better use of time. That would cause you pain rather than pleasure. So that is what we will be looking at on Thursday and taking into account. Obviously, this committee is here to scrutinise and provide views to the Cabinet. So instead of asking us about what our decision is going to be and to justify it, I wonder if there are serious concerns in this regard, whether I should actually be throwing the question back and saying, would you like to put forward the view of scrutiny in this regard to help inform Cabinet?
I'm sure at the end of this that corporate scrutiny will give you some strong recommendations. Don't worry, we will make sure that we formed recommendations at the end of this for you to digest. Could I just bring the diocese then, and then I want to bring in my very patient corporate scrutiny colleagues who are desperate to ask questions. Who's going to first, Rob or Jeff? Jeff.
Yes, yeah. Colleagues, I've just realised that my internet connection is insecure. So if there's anybody in the room, online, parents or counsellors, I will email everything I'm going to say tomorrow. If you'd like to contact me, I can send you that email if I lose contact on the screen. First of all, can I thank Ashley Whittaker for inviting me to speak? And
can you introduce yourself, Mr. Williams?
I will, yeah. So I'm Jeff Williams. I'm the Director of Education for two dioceses, the Diocese of Winchester and the Diocese of Portsmouth. And I have strategic responsibility for 150 schools and 38,000 children in them. And we work across 5 local authorities in Hampshire, the Isle of Wight and East Dorset. I'm grateful for the invite to comment, and I'm also grateful that Ashley took my challenge to not just reduce what we'd submitted to the council in 3 documents to a summary for this meeting. So the full responses are appended, and I would encourage people to actually read those as well. I'm asking the Scrutiny Committee and the Cabinet to be bold and to pause and to stop the consultation and decision making and to engage in a full consultation for 6 reasons. I'm disappointed that Councillor Bacon used the word clouded when he talked about the way that the future use of schools is going to be made, because I feel that's compromised the consultation. Councillor Bacon also talked about that the Isle of Wight didn't have the luxury, the council didn't have the luxury of pausing this. On behalf of the parents, the children, they don't have the luxury or the money or the time to follow what you are proposing. So I'm asking you to propose. I'm more than happy to engage with officers on a full island-wide discussion with head teachers of all schools to come up with a far better solution. I feel, and we have evidence, I met yesterday with the 6 head teachers and the 6 chairs of governors. We have evidence on at least 17 points that the consultation and the decision-making process is flawed, is not transparent, compromises government advice, and the documentation that has been circulated is not clear. You've had some examples of these given by the head teacher of one of our schools this evening. We have lots more to show that a cut and paste activity has taken place with regard to the information provided to schools, where unfortunately information about one school has been pasted into the document of another school. That, for me, challenges the entire process and the documentation and the way that this has been handled so far. Financial consideration has not been duly considered in total. We've had some comments tonight. I'm just trying to be quick, I'm sorry, because I'm aware that I don't have long. But what I would say is that the Church of England in this diocese is not acting in a NIMBY position, not in my backyard. In the 10 years where I've held this role, we've worked with local authorities, including the Isle of Wight, to close 3 Church of England schools. And we did that alongside the local authority. In this case, we oppose the closure of the 3 Church of England schools But equally tonight, I speak on behalf of the other 3 community schools as well, who challenge the whole process, documentation, transparency, the lack of criteria, the lack of shared criteria, the change in use of criteria. And we will be referring this to the independent adjudicator for schools if the Cabinet on Thursday decide to move forward with the proposal to close. My colleague Rob has some specific examples to give you, but as I say, I will summarise what I've just said and more. And if anybody wants to contact me, my email is publicly available. I'll send it to you tomorrow with all the documents I've referred to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. No, thank you, Jeff, and Rob can come in.
Hi, sorry, thank you.
So we got
Just
that now.
by way of introduction, I'm Rob Sanders and I'm Deputy Director of Education for the 2 dioceses, as Jeff explained. I mean, I've been listening carefully to the questions that have been asked. So I'm conscious I'm not wishing to repeat what's already been said. I was going to ask questions around the use of criteria, the use of planning areas, the conflation of 2 different issues in terms of the future of school sites that I think has compromised the consultation, about the rural schools presumption against closure, given that the 4 out of the 6 schools are rural. The degree of factual inaccuracies in the reports that one of our head teachers has already highlighted a few examples of, but there's many more that have been reported to us. So I just want to put 2 or perhaps 3 questions, if I may. One around the use of criteria for school selection. I understand it's a complicated process, but I want to understand whether or not Cabinet can be confident that the DfE publication opening and closing maintained schools has been closely adhered to and followed. I'm not sure that the criteria necessarily reflect the criteria that are highlighted in that particular document. And I think the reason why stakeholders would like to see some form of a criteria, either scoring or grid or some way of being able to understand a decision is for each school locally. You know, why one school against a number of other schools in the same planning area? The criteria haven't been quite consistently used. So, for example, standard seems to be the main driver in some proposed closures, yet the schools that the children are potentially offered as alternative schools, should that school close, are equally judged as requiring improvement under current Ofsteds, for example. So, you know, in Oakfield, why close a school with a wonderful school site, fairly new buildings where a lot of investment has taken place? Why close that school compared to a number of other schools in the same planning area that perhaps don't have the same facilities that can enable children to flourish as part of a good education? So it's questions like that which people need reassurance about. My other 2 questions really are around the costs. It's been referred to briefly, but the report talks about home to school transport implications, looking at around £350,000. But also, what are the costs in terms of redundancies and staffing changes? In terms of the urgency of making this decision, how much money is this really going to save overall when you take into account all of those different cost implications of the decisions being made? My understanding is a lot of the debt in education at the moment is around pressure on the high needs block and SEND funding and so on, rather than a cumulative deficit of school budgets. That is projected to come further down the line, but is it urgent enough to make such dramatic decisions this quickly without perhaps some extended consultation? And my third question is, in terms of due consideration for the impact on vulnerable communities and families that are going to be affected by some of these potential closures, we're hugely concerned about that in certain areas in particular, but across all of those 6 schools, the capability of parents to be able to move their children to alternative locations and so on, when they don't necessarily have the financial capability and flexibility to get their children to alternative schools and locations. I would like reassurance and an understanding that implications for vulnerable families have been properly understood and explored. Other than that, all the other questions, we have many of them, but I don't want to repeat what's already been asked through the public gallery. Thank you.
Thank you. I will hand over to Councillor Bacon, and then I'm going to open all the questions to corporate scrutiny, who I'm sure have been scribbling down and expanding on lots of all the questions that have been asked so far. So, Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. I was trying to note down matters there. I'm not sure I did so entirely adequately. Is it urgent enough? I think I've answered that. Our view is yes, it is urgent enough. This has been going on for far too long. There is not the time to delay further. Reassurance about the process. Again, I think I have answered. From my perspective, obviously that is something that Cabinet will need to make a formal decision about essentially on Thursday. But this has been a long, detailed, carefully considered process and has occurred conscious of the fact that potential challenges have been talked about for some time. I mean, a clear intention to challenge should decisions be made that the diocese does not like has just been indicated. So you don't go through a cavalier process in a cavalier way if you know that someone is going to be challenging you. And implications were raised in relation to transport, etc. It's, as with everything, there's a balancing process. The initial choice of schools, part of those criteria was balancing the need to reduce surplus places against the potential for disruption. That has been a key consideration throughout. I believe has been looked at, but again, that has to be subject to a final decision on whether we are assured in the case of each school that has occurred, and that will be part of Thursday's meeting.
Right. Thank you everybody for your questions. I'm going to lead on to the councillors asking a question, but I'm going to take my prerogative and go first. And without anybody losing their tempers, because we know that councillors can do that when they're asked questions that they don't like. The public prefer when people are honest and about how they come to a decision and how they got to that process. So I would like an honest answer that do you think the initial delays in closing Chillerton School and the inability to make a decision at the very beginning when that was going on has actually led now to 6 schools being closed in one hit? If the decision had been made methodically and with purpose at the time when that school was looked at for closure, would you have then looked at area by area rather than the whole island? So as you know, in the previous administration, we looked at freshwater, and freshwater school was done under due process, and it was closed in that area and just that area looked at. So my question is, are you doing 6 schools now in one hit and this huge amount of pressure on officers, etc., because a decision should have been made more methodically over the last 4 years? And if that is the question, if that is the answer, then shouldn't we be taking these schools part by part and admitting that 6 schools in one hit is a mammoth task to take on board?
I don't agree in relation to the Chillerton point. I think this has perhaps needed a holistic approach such as is being taken now for some considerable time. If you go to some head teachers, they'll say this problem goes back to 2018. And if action had been taken at that point, and I'm not pointing any fingers at any individual or grouping here, then that methodical approach could have been taken. I think this problem is dyed in the wool and has been for many years. I don't think the situation over Chillerton, however one regards how that was dealt with, has affected the need for this process today. Indeed, some within the full council chamber in the last 12 months have said that this process is not radical enough. I can recall one member saying, I think it was either 9 or 11 schools should appear on the list. So,
Councillor Bacon, you're missing my point. The point is that we're now at the end, coming towards the end of a council 4-year term, And actually, this is a lot of schools to do in one hit, a lot of work for council officers. If the process is flawed, it will be because there is so much having to be done at one hit. My question for the honest answer was, do you think you should have done one over a yearly period? So you might have done 4 schools over this term rather than doing 6 in, but don't worry, I'm going to hand over to the councillors because Councillor Brodie's itching to ask a question and I can feel it. So Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. And I will get in early because I'm going to have to leave in about an hour's time. But and I have numerous questions, as you'd expect, and we won't have the opportunity to do so because the format of this is entirely unsatisfactory. It's not your fault. Thankfully, we will move to a committee system in May, and decision making can be democratic on this council instead of an exclusive group of people. Today, we were advised that the monitoring officer, I don't know if he's online or anything, has deemed that an executive decision cannot be referred to full council. I would dispute that, and I would make the point that back in 2010-11, I can't tell you the exact date because the minutes aren't available online, there was a full council regarding the move from 3-tier to 2-tier education. That was the closure of 16 middle schools and the repurposing of many of them as primary schools, such as Kitbridge Middle becoming Honey Hill. And I remember, my memory's still good enough, and I've been on this council a long time, a meeting that probably went on till nearly midnight from 6 p.m. as we went through every one of those middle schools and the repurposings, etc., etc., etc. What is interesting is that we had a cabinet from 2001. That's 10 years beforehand. And they took the decision, that administration, to take it to full council by executive decision. The sort of thing that the monitoring officer says is the prerogative of cabinet. There are 5 members of the cabinet that will make this decision who were there that night. Councillor Bacon, Councillor Stevens, the deputy leader, Councillor P.C. Wilcox, a former leader, Councillor Jones-Evans, and Councillor Fuller. Most of them aren't here, but Councillors Bacon and Stevens are. They will remember that night. It was a brave decision, and the decisions were made on the night. Can I ask the leader of the council why he will not invoke the democratic values that he purports to support and refer this decision to a full council on the 15th of January, thus only delaying any closures by a couple of weeks, 3 weeks at the most, in terms of the process? Can he give me an answer to that? Is he still a Democrat or is he now an exclusivist? Thank you.
I'm taking that saying as well, by the way, on Bagenham. Councillor Jordan.
Okay, so I depend on the monitoring officer as I must in terms of our officer supporting us with information. And the information is that there is no power to refer decision making to full council if the intended decisions are executive functions, as full council has no lawful jurisdiction to make such decisions. Now, section 9D, paragraph 3 of the Local Government Act 2000 make this clear. Section 3 says, accordingly, any function which is a responsibility of an executive of a local authority under executive arrangements may not be discharged by the authority. That is the information and advice that I'm given, and on that basis, I can find no other solution other than to say that full council cannot make this decision lawfully.
Well, that sucks, doesn't it?
Chair.
Councillor Brodie.
Chair, just to come back, I mean, a response that I anticipated. All I would say is I'm getting a little fed up with this administration hiding behind the bureaucrats and instead of making the decisions themselves. It's one of the reasons why we have made very little progress in terms of social housing, given that they hide behind the decisions and the advice of the Director of Finance. And frankly, I think it's shameful. My second question is about these mysterious place planning areas. Now, I've been on this council 20 years, and I think they go back further than 2010 or whatever it's claimed it is, because I've never seen anything different to these place planning areas. And yet we're told by Councillor Bacon that this has been a whole island exercise. And yet when you read the recommendation report, what happens? It's broken down by place planning areas. The whole skeleton to the argument is to go to Cowes, East Cowes, then the mysterious split in Ryde between Ryde Town and Ryde Rural, and Newport, which amazingly suddenly has Arreton and Wootton attached to it, doesn't have a special rural area, and Sandown and Shanklin. It's a skeleton for the whole arguments that your officers and you are putting forward. Do you really, really believe that we should expect to believe you that this is not about place planning areas and that it is about a whole area thing? Because I think it's a nonsense. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bacon.
I don't think I can expect you to believe me, Jeff. I would ask you to believe me. If you want, I've always been an optimist, but and if you want to hear more about the history of place planning areas, that would be a matter I could turn behind me for. I would, however, just like to correct one point that was raised in the first question that was asked of the leader, where it was asserted that knocking this process on, even though we can't do that, would delay it by 3 weeks. Because we have a very tight timetable because we were affected by a general election that was caused last summer. If this is knocked into a January decision, that will add a year to the process because of the subsequent stages that need to be followed and followed properly. So I'd just like to have that on record. Thank you.
Councillor.
I won't hog it all.
One way. So it's fine. Councillor Brodie, Councillor Spink, and then Councillor Drew.
I'll do one more. All I would say is that by your answer, you demonstrate that this is cut and dried. To be frank, you have basically said that the 6 schools that are in the report will be confirmed on Thursday, which is what everybody knows.
No, I did not say that.
Yeah,
I said that if a decision is to be made.
You implied it. There's no doubt about it. Finally, I'll limit myself to 3, and if I get a chance to answer before 7:15, I will. The LGA report that seems to be like tablets of stone handed down from on high. Who are the LGA? Shall I tell you what the LGA is? Public Gallery. It's the Local Government Association. It's a bunch of councillors who like little trips all over the country, advising each other. That's what the LGA is. And it costs a fortune to the taxpayer to support this. I have regularly asked about the benefits of the LGA at full council in my time here. And I never get an answer. One of the representatives, Councillor Lucioni, is here. I've never had an answer. Or Councillor Stevens as well. They've had lots of jollies out of the LGA, but we never find out what the benefits are. And yet this report, which I've read, I don't accept that as some sort of tablet of stone. Do you really think we should accept something like that as being some sort of important document in this decision making? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnny. Let them speak. I don't think it was a question, it was more of a statement. Councillor Spink. Then answer about the LGA.
I've done all my courses online and I do all my meetings hybrid. Thank you.
Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions, but perhaps I could just ask 2, which are on matters of points of law, and then give someone else a turn, and if there's time, ask a couple more in due course.
As long as your points of law don't take up the next half an hour, Councillor Spink.
Do they ever?
Tight.
Do they ever?
Sometimes.
The first is this, that the monitoring officer's advice was only served, as I understand it, by an email at about 2:30 this afternoon. If it's to be relied upon that that advice precludes this matter going to full council, will there be time for communities and councillors and whoever else challenges perhaps that legal advice, A, to research it, and B, to get the advice of a professional lawyer themselves? So that's my first. May we have time to do that, because that's sprung on us with no notice, and I'd like to consider the legal situation.
Councillor Jordan.
I think I made very clear that we have a monitoring officer. It is the protocol that we refer to the monitoring officer on matters of legal process procedures and outcomes. And I am more than happy to rely and depend upon the information that I'm giving. I have no other alternative.
Chair, can I just say, it's advice you're given. You don't have to take it.
I've done that all my life. Look where it got me. I'm sat here.
Chair.
Councillor Jordan.
When it's all very well to say that advice is given. When it's legal advice, which is what I asked for, it becomes extraordinarily difficult to say thank you for that legal advice, but I'm going to ignore that legal advice you've given me and do something completely different, exposing this authority to risks of legal challenge. I'm not going to do that ever. You wouldn't do it. No councillor in this council would do it in my position. We are not in a position where we can reject legal advice in that way, in my view.
Yes, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I do understand, Councillor Jordan, that you take the advice of the monitoring officer, and as the leader of the council, it's difficult for you to go against that advice. But bearing in mind that this is a consultation with the public, and the procedure has to be fair and be seen to be fair, bearing in mind that the legal advice was only served this afternoon, would it not be a matter of fairness and due respect to the public, who are obviously concerned, to give them time to seek their own legal advice?
Chair, the legal advice I asked and sought was nothing to do with the public consultation. It was to do on the matter of whether this decision could be referred to full council. I'm very confident that the information I was given and advice is accurate. I've read it out and there we are. We are now all aware of what the law says about full council making a decision.
Councillor Spink, I'm going to answer to Councillor Drew before I hand it back to you, because I think we've done that bit there. And Councillor Downer, so everybody's got a chance this evening. So Councillor Drew.
Thank you, Chair. I think in relation to the point that Councillor Spink just raised and indeed Councillor Brodie, I mean, the other thing I would ask is, from whom would we fear a legal challenge if that were the case? I mean, ultimately, I don't think that any member of the public is going to seek to dislodge a democratic decision by 39 councillors, but that's perhaps an aside point. The other one is, we could surely have an indicative vote. We could have an indicative vote, and then Cabinet would be able to ratify that if they so choose. That would certainly give councillors the opportunity to debate this a little bit more in detail. The substantive question I had, though, was in relation to the all of the consultation, which is this, which I think is significant. There is clearly a very high risk that this is going to be challenged by way of JR. I think it's eminently amenable to it, given some of the issues, you know, without wanting to rehearse them.
Councillor Dew, as the legal guy, you need to say judicial review, otherwise the public gallery are listening as well. We don't get into legal.
Yeah, certainly. So essentially, there is going to be some prospects, I think, of a challenge, whatever form that takes. Surely then, I mean, given that the council has, in relation to the Westridge planning judicial review, I think spent somewhere in the region of £1 million defending that, and this is clearly a costs exercise. What I'd like to ask is, what has our legal department said regarding the amenability of this decision potentially to judicial review, and what is the comment? Thank you.
Councillor Jordan?
I think I might have to, it's an ongoing situation whereby independent, as I understand, legal advice.
Councillor Bacon? No. The reason I'm saying that is you are the cabinet who are leading this council. So if there is going to be a judicial review, you've already said here you used to be a lawyer. You 8 people are making this decision. It's a very weighty decision, but it is your decision. So I will get dragged over the coals if I don't expect you to answer this question regarding judicial reviews and have to refer it back. I can feel Councillor Brodie's beady eyes on me as I speak. You should be able to answer that question.
I can answer it. I was just looking to see if the committee would like a bit more detail, but I will answer as best I can. Detailed advice has been obtained throughout this process. It has been sought independently. There's been a consciousness of challenge throughout this process. It's been made very clear from some quarters of a potential intent to do that, depending on what the decision is on Thursday. And I would suggest that Councillor Brodie make sure he knows the difference between inferring and implying. But we are very conscious, and we would not be proceeding, I believe, as a lawyer, if we were not sure of our position on the basis of advice received. That would be silly. Mirroring what Councillor Jordan says, we have to act on the advice we're given, and if we're given clear legal advice, we can act in accordance with that.
I'll hand back to Councillor Drew. And
just a point of information, just referring back to 2011. And as I say, I can't access the minutes because they're not online. I mean, I'm sure I can get them at some point. But in those times, we regularly had full councils, which had precisely what Councillor Drew referred to, I now remember, indicative votes, because you will recall, Councillor Bacon, that the Cabinet would then meet straight afterwards to confirm the decision of full council. Would perhaps, and I'll ask a question if you don't mind, would Councillor Jordan consider that?
Thank you. I have it up on the screen again. The problem is that the advice I have, quoting the Local Government Act 2000, makes it clear that full council cannot legally make the decision. That's the problem that we're faced with.
But I think...
Yeah, I'm asking for an indicative vote, not a decision.
So, Councillor, through the chair.
That would guide the Cabinet, show what the democratic view was.
Yeah, go on, do it.
39 members.
I think we could go on about this for ages. I can see you, Councillor Bacon. I'm choosing to ignore you. I think the point is, in a minute, as frustrating as that might be for you, I think the point is, and what Councillor Brodie and everybody is trying to make, that actually to ask this to come to full council is a matter of respect and democracy. That they don't have to, we're getting stuck on the point of they can't make the legal decision. But what full council can do is make a recommendation. It brings the debate into a larger, fuller environment that involves all the councillors. Councillor Jordan, I'm either boring you or you're definitely sighing, and I'm sure I'm not boring you. What we could do is ask as a matter of respect that it goes to full council, and full council gives a recommendation, and what Councillor Brodie is saying is in the past, that recommendation was then taken to Cabinet and it was dealt with. when I listen to you, you say we need to make this decision in January. Well, if I was you, why do you all want to make this decision on Thursday and all have that heat on your shoulders when you could take it to full council, ask for a respectful decision from full council, and then you have a cabinet meeting straight after to carry that out? Just a suggestion. I'm going to go to Councillor Drew. You don't need to answer. It was just a statement. I'm still not going to let you come in, Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. So on that theme, but perhaps slightly more broadly, I think one of the risks of the narrowness potentially of some of the considerations in the report is that, for example, going to Councillor Ellis's point with regards to the presumption against closing rural schools, that I've looked at the report in great depth. I cannot find, and apologies if it is in there, but a piece of work which goes to a very empirical, econometric basis of understanding what are the implications, for example, for children from rural deprived communities, and indeed from Oakfield as well, and others where this is going to have huge repercussions. It will echo out into very different areas. I just don't think the report covers that. And the report, as far as it goes, is a good one, and I would certainly commend the officers for the work that they've put into it. I just think it's not quite yet oven ready. There are issues that need to be ventilated, and I think the impact, for example, in central rural, it's going to be an educational desert. We're going to have massive implications. The travel costs will be huge. These are things which I just don't see in the report. I think it's too narrow. I think it's going to be amenable to JR. It's going to cost the council a lot of money. So my question is, where is that in the report? If it's not there, what can we do to remedy it?
Councillor Bacon.
Thank you, Chair. I think one point I was going to raise as a point of information more than anything else. The issue in relation to full council was actually only raised in the last 2 or 3 days, as far as I'm aware. It would have been helpful if this is the belief and wish of members to have raised this before, and perhaps we could have gone through this exercise of having a full council last week and proceeding to cabinet this week, or indeed doing them on the same day. But I've explained the issues of timescale we now have. And I repeat that we've not made decisions. We're making decisions on Thursday. If the decisions are not made until a point in the new year, we will lose a year. And we will, I think it's made clear from an answer I gave earlier, that means we increase the deficit by £5 million.
Councillor Bacon, I definitely will have to challenge that, but I'm not going to do it now because it's not just the Cllr show this evening. Councillor Downer.
Thank you, Chair. I've been presented with 2 questions. How can it be evidenced and shared publicly that the correct processes and procedure have been followed throughout the consultation? And the second one, how can it be evidenced that the criteria used by local authority officers to make proposals to the Cabinet have been used consistently and that they have been independently checked? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bacon.
We have a very extensive bundle of papers before us, which I think makes clear both those points.
Councillor Bacon, Councillor Downer is a really well-respected councillor here. He has been very upset about the closure of his school, and he deserves more than one sentence in an answer. And you could print off 1,000 bits of paper, but Councillor Bacon, it doesn't mean that they're relevant. So can you please answer Councillor Downer's question in full and not just refer that we have a lot of paper in front of us? Thank you.
I can read through the document. Sorry, this is getting quite difficult, obviously, but the reports have been published which contain the analysis. I could go through that line by line. You've already indicated you don't want me to do that.
Councillor Bacon, I know this is difficult, but this is really difficult for all of those people who have got children at those schools. It is completely difficult for everybody else involved. This is scrutiny. We are trying to be your critical friend and ask questions that we have a right to ask. So I'm sorry if it's difficult. I am trying to make it semi-light-hearted for you, But Councillor Downer asked a very detailed question. Councillor Downer, can you ask your question again, please, so that Councillor Bacon can concentrate and answer that properly for you? And you don't need to repeat from the documents. You're a cabinet member. You're just about to make a massive decision. You should know this inside out and back to front without having to refer to pieces of paper.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just repeat that I've been presented with these two questions. How can it be evidenced and shared publicly that the correct processes and procedures have been followed throughout the consultation? And the second part, how can it be evidenced that the criteria used by local authority officers to make proposals to the Cabinet have been used consistently and they have been independently checked? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bacon.
I'm not trying to wind anyone up by saying this, but the question, how can it be evidenced and showed publicly? That is why we have a detailed report on the general situation and the particular situation of each school. Wroxall Primary School is dealt with in the papers at pages 203 to 234, I think it is. In that document, the original proposal was set out together with detail of the consultation process and the analysis of the responses that were received, both in the online process, from emails, and from the specific representations that were made by various parties who chose to do so, the list includes Councillor Downer's on page 213. Those are summarised. I know also that the full responses have been provided to Cabinet and also available for Scrutiny Committee members who have received those and read them through. Following that analysis of responses, options are set out in the paper, starting at page 214. The initial proposal is there set out, followed by, I think it is 8 alternative options that were put forward in respect of Wroxall schools, some of which affected other schools as well. There's an analysis of each of those options, which I intend to be presenting to Cabinet on Thursday night. Following that analysis of options, we then see the forecast data to inform decision making.
I get your point, Councillor Bacon. I get your point.
Well, I'm trying to answer the question now, and then quite importantly, because Wroxall is a rural school, there's an analysis of those criteria which have been mentioned already in one question on rural schools and an analysis in relation to those rural schools. There then appears at the end of the paper sections dealing with equality impact assessment, impacts on other schools, special educational needs, and also the position in respect of early years, bearing in mind the duty the council has in respect of early years. Finally, that information in respect of Wroxall School is summarised in the currently existing recommendation that is put forward on page 232. So that is how the information is presented. That's how it's presented for Wroxall Primary, but there's an equivalent document for each of the other 5 schools, and that has been a public document since last Wednesday, published in accordance with the normal timetable.
Thank you. So I'm going to bring Councillor Downer back in, then Councillor Blake.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I have read that, but those questions were presented to me to ask. But the other thing about it is I'm very passionate about Wroxall School, and I'll thank Councillor Ellis also for her comments about rural schools, because I've spoken to officers and in Scrutiny, and you know what I think about it all. It's going to disadvantage residents, pupils, cause a lot of upset throughout those schools, and also early years provision. There won't be any in Wroxall. So, you know, you're taking the whole heart out of the community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Downer. Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully mine's a bit easier to answer because it's about the same.
Sorry, can we have a first aider to the public gallery, please? We're just going to adjourn for 5 minutes. Okay? Thank you. Fine. Can we all look to retake our seats, please?
To bang the gavel for you.
No, one sec. Always want to do this. Order. Can we all look to come back into the meeting, please? Fine, good. Excellent, excellent. They all thought it was going to be me that would flake out before the end of the meeting. So, okay, fine, right. I'm going to bring in, because I did forget, and I'm really sorry, is I did say that Councillor Lilly, as a ward councillor in an affected school, could come in. So, Councillor Lilly, can you come on, please, to make your brief question?
Sorry, can you hear me? I'm just okay.
We can hear you.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak and ask a question. I do feel that the whole process hasn't actually fully been reasonable and fair. And my particular question, and particularly from what other people have said, is about what I call collateral damage. I feel that one of the particular points is that poverty does affect educational attainment, and particularly in the school in my ward. Please can I excuse if I'm a little bit hesitant, because I'm still recovering from an operation. So please keep that in mind. There is a well-established link between poverty and educational attainment, with children from lower income households less likely to succeed than their wealthier peers. The families that in my area and in the Oakfield area and the ward of Councillor Drew have been hit by COVID and the cost of living crisis, and have barely come through that. They are now faced with a huge change of the schools. And in fact, through the consultation process, this really came out in the meetings, or the meetings that I've had with residents and with the school. I want to know that, yes, the big scheme of things is to have better education in the future, but you're actually destroying the opportunity of a current generation of children that that need that kind of holistic support that they're getting, which enables them to go on to being able to be responsive to education. What resources are going to be put into the whole community? Because Oakfield School is not just a school, it's also a community centre of a variety of resources, like the community pantry. And you, by your decision, or the Cabinet's decision, are likely to increase the poverty of those families and put them at higher risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. As the question has asked about resources, I will look behind me on this one, because I think it is appropriate to do that, because that is very much an operational matter. I will, however, firstly say that, as the report on Oakfield notes, there is full awareness of the issues that Councillor Lilly has raised this evening and has raised consistently throughout this process. And I thank him for his input throughout. He has been a champion for his ward and the school, and we have received much from him and read it with interest in all its detail. One could also say, as I say, I will look behind me in a moment, but this is about educational standards. We do seem to forget that occasionally when becoming focused on particular issues, and improving education standards overall is a way of tackling deprivation in itself and the effects of deprivation. If you give children the best opportunity possible, that is one of the key ways that you can deal with deprivation issues. I don't think that's a point that can be argued. In terms of specific resources, though, give myself a little break and, as I say, turn to the officers who have been patiently sitting behind, and they can address that particular point. I think the detail that Councillor Lilly is looking for in that regard.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Whittaker.
Forgive me if I missed the beginning of the question, Councillor Lilly. I think I've got the main parts of it. So the reports included quality impact assessments for each of the proposals. And the matters you raise around the specific needs of the community around Oakfield, we believe have been covered in the equality impact assessment. And also in terms of the non-educational elements of provision on the site, for example, the community pantry, we believe that such provision would be able to either continue on the site, depending on what happens with the site in the future, or be re-provisioned at an alternative location, but with close proximity to its current location.
Thank you. Can I go to Mr. Cook for a question and then, sorry, oh yeah, Councillor Blake, I forgot you and you're my lift home, so I don't want to get up your nose. Councillor Blake. Yes.
Sorry.
Councillor Blake, Councillor Critchison, I did forget the order, Mr. Cook and Councillor Stewart. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Re-begin my question that was stopped earlier. The now infamous Chillerton letter stated that the children of God's Hill that were moved from Chillerton to God's Hill would not have their education affected during the term that they would be at that school. Does this council, or does the cabinet members agree that if the decision is taken to close God's Hill, that would then present this council as being dishonest in their promise to not affect the children's education or disrupt the children's education during their time at primary school?
Councillor Bacon.
I do note the question. The letter contains an undertaking, but it also contains, I don't have it in front of me, but it contains a statement that the undertaking pertains unless circumstances change. I think what we have here is a situation where circumstances have changed.
Are we really going to hold that as a reason? Wow. Okay, Mr. Whittaker, see if you can get a better response. That seems quite appalling, to be fair. Councillor Brake, you've clearly got supplementary and as shocked as me.
I'm willing to listen to Mr. Whittaker's addition to that first question before I add a supplementary if he's got something to add to that.
I had nothing to add. It was just Councillor Bacon said he didn't have it in front of him, and I have it in front of me, and I was going to offer him to be able to look at the letter.
Can I just say that, and I know everybody up there is, you know, anybody looking at this is reading it, to write a letter from this council, because we're councillors, you know, we represent that council to our our electorate. I couldn't say to one of my residents that the council wrote a letter saying that if they worked with a school that was being closed, that school then wouldn't be closed. But actually, I've got my fingers crossed behind my back, and if circumstances don't change, then I won't stand by it. That sounds pretty appalling in my book, because actually we all know when Chillerton was being closed that there was going to be far more school closures than just Chillerton. So why would you write a letter about school closures and then actually say, well, unless circumstances change? That doesn't seem to wash with me, and it really does seem unfair. Councillor Ellis is going to bust a gut in a minute if I don't let her come in quickly, and then Councillor Blake. And I need to make sure that we get to recommendations before Councillor Brodie has to leave. Councillor Ellis.
I do have the letter in front of me, and I'm sorry to disagree with Councillor Bacon, but on a quick read through, I can't see that it says circumstances would change. Though what I believe to be the relevant sentence says, this arrangement would remain in place for those pupils currently in years 3, 4 and 5 for the remainder of their primary education, or until a suitable education could be provided back on the Chillerton and Rookley site. I've got that letter here if anyone wants me to hand it round.
As we have other questions, we will move on to Councillor Critchinson. I'll let you come back in. Oh, Councillor Blake, sorry. Yeah, Councillor Blake, supplement.
Can I add to Councillor Ellis's point with my supplementary that say that that clause was in that letter, what circumstances have changed, because there has been a declining birth rate since, well, when the middle schools were taken into consideration, at least, you know, we were shown a graph that was diving towards a floor then. So what circumstances have materially changed that would cause that that caveat to be enacted?
I think the fact that we are now in a holistic place planning process, that is the circumstance.
Excuse me. Right, sorry, we can't take anybody from the public gallery. Councillor Ellis, because this does involve.
My last point, just quickly, I understand what you're saying, Councillor Bacon, about circumstances having changed, but my point is, and I think the point that the people in the public gallery and Councillor Baker are trying to raise is, this letter does not contain any such caveat about circumstances changing. I have just read the sentence to you, and I'm happy, if it's through the chair, if it's appropriate, to come bring the letter over to you now to have a look at. It honestly doesn't say that.
I'm happy to undertake to review that letter again. It is a few days since I've read it. I can't keep everything in my head. I'm sorry, but I can't. So I get the point that is being put forward. This is not making a decision tonight. If this panel is going to make a recommendation in relation to that, that may be the way to push this forward. But I will very much happily talk to Councillor Ellis with the letter in sight and review that.
So, as we all understand, corporate scrutiny can give you recommendations that you will then take to Cabinet on Thursday and discuss then. You are not making any decisions this evening as a Cabinet. This is corporate scrutiny's meeting, and we will make recommendations to you, which is for you 8 Cabinet members to decide if you undertake those recommendations. Councillor Critchinson.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to all of that, and this is following on really with the Godzilla theme, because I'm a rural representative, but not that area, but very close. And the heart of community is often the school. Let's back a little bit, sorry. And you do lose the heart of community. I've seen that through Cllr and Chillerton being part of my area as well. And I feel that I can see that coming with Godzilla, and it really pains me to look at that in the comments in the pack, having read through those, and I wasn't sure that enough weight had been put on that letter, really, having dealt with some of the families through the Chillerton process. So I would like that. My question is, please, would you look through, put more weight on that, and do you think you have, really? But also the transport costs as well with that, taking that into account, because the transport issues were back at one of the first scrutiny meetings when we first discussed this, that was a big issue, and that I don't think you've put enough weight on that as well. So please review that, and a recommendation would be that if we can say that now as a scrutiny committee, that we look back at that decision with Godzilla on that list because of those issues, or maybe the amalgamation of those 3 schools, the Wroxhill, Godzilla, Arreton area, leaving such a big hole in a rural area, which is quite concerning. I feel that maybe we could take that forward as a recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cook, then Councillor Stewart. Is that okay?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to expand on Councillor Drew's comments earlier about the legal and other challenges that are open to various groups, specifically the diocese and their statement that they will appeal to the adjudicator. I was wondering what effect that would have on the process. Would the act of the appeal itself suspend notices being issued? Obviously, if the appeal is successful, that changes everything. But will the appeal itself impact on the process at all?
Councillor Bacon.
My understanding is that it doesn't suspend the process and an advisory judgment is received as a result of that consideration.
Supplementary, Councillor.
Any idea of how long these things take?
I honestly don't know that off the top of my head, but I possibly know a man who does.
So there are examples of the schools adjudicator being turned to in situations like this recently, and experience elsewhere has been that the schools adjudicator has acted very promptly because they understand the time sensitive nature or that often exists with relation to these types of proposals, and the key thing here being that because of the statutory process that has to be followed, and the fact that we'll be entering a pre-election period, in 2025, that certain elements of the process need to be completed before the onset of that. And our view is that if someone does refer the matter or some matters to the schools adjudicator, that we'd be optimistic that they would consider it quite quickly, so that the process could continue whilst they were looking at it. Of course, if the schools adjudicator, depending on what the outcome was, that might then affect what happens. But we'd be confident that the schools adjudicator would deal things quite quickly in a timely way, keeping the best interests of children and the island education system in their thinking.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart and then Councillor Drew, and then I have some ideas towards a recommendation. I want the recommendations to be made while Councillor Brodie is still here, and I know I'm acutely aware he's got to go at 7:15. So Councillor Stewart, Councillor Drew, and then we need to come to some recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, first thing, I think it's worth saying, and I'm sure that most of the committee have seen this, that we really welcome an educational establishment based on the island, and we recognise how much work has been put in by the officers and actually by the cabinet. We may not agree entirely, but we recognise that their work has been done. I've got a very simple question to start. How many academy schools refuse to take part in the school place planning? Three. Out of? Sorry. I apologise for having to turn around for detailed figures, but 3 out of 4. That's very helpful, thank you. It does come down to it should be a whole island thing, and that's been investigated and raised by other people. In September 2002, when I was on the Education Scrutiny panel, I raised the point repeatedly afterwards, both to Hampshire, obviously to the current officers, and to cabinet members and anybody who would listen to me, which is after a while, but not very many, but we won't go into that. The question was always the criteria to select which schools should be considered for changes was critical. And therefore that criteria had to be decided on a whole island basis with all stakeholders involved. I made this point so strongly, I virtually was making it in my sleep. And what I'm hearing today, and what I've seen through the enormous number of papers that I've gone through, is that it is impossible, utterly impossible, to understand the criteria and the weighting that was attached to each, and even a possible matrix for decision making. It has put the cabinet in a very difficult position to have to go through every single piece of paper to extent to allow themselves to be sure that they are making a correct decision. Question is, does the cabinet member feel that the criteria should be dealt with in such a cavalier fashion?
Councillor Bacon.
I disagree, it's a cavalier fashion. If you create a single list, you automatically place restrictions on yourself. What is being done here is in the same way it's a whole island exercise, it's a all relevant points exercise, and the papers that have been produced seek to set out that, as I've said, situations are different with every school and every school under consideration. And what has been done, and it does become a matter of professional judgment in such cases, is to apply that professional judgment to everything raised initially in the selection process through officers and myself, and then through the consultation process with the further points that have been raised, and they are taken account of as has been seen in the analysis.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon. I'm going to lead to recommendations now.
Can I, sorry, just, you are the chair.
I am. Nice of you to notice. Councillor Brodie, can we lead to some recommendations? I'm acutely aware that you do have to go and have been very involved in this process. And Councillor Drew, did you speak to Councillor Brodie with your?
I did, yes.
We did. We agreed that I would speak. I mean, very quickly, what disappoints me about this whole process is that I am not going to ever have the opportunity as it stands to speak on behalf of my community, the most deprived community on the Isle of Wight to some extent. Look at the data in the appendices. Michael Lilly talks about Oakfield. It's nowhere near the level of deprivation and poverty that children at my local school, Barton Primary School, start off with. Nowhere near. People need to recognize, and I am being denied by this leadership the opportunity to speak on their behalf. Because I've come along on Thursday, and I'm bet you bottom dollar that the chair of the cabinet, the leader, won't allow me to speak as much as you have, Chair, and I thank you for that this evening. I would like to propose, therefore, that this committee urges the cabinet on Thursday to convene a full council as early in January as is practicable. Now, I'm happy to meet on the 7th or the 8th, I think it is, the 8th, as is practicable, to allow all members of the Isle of Wight Council an indicative vote on school places planning proposals. And that should be followed on the same evening by the Cabinet, who should have cognizance of the decision of that full council and make their legal executive decision. Now, in my view, no Democrat could deny me that, or this committee that. No, none at all. They would not be able to justify it to any level. Therefore, I formally propose that, and I look for a seconder, and let's have a vote. Thank you.
Councillor Drew has seconded that. And I also have a recommendation to the committee after that as well.
Can we vote on that one?
We move to the vote. Those in favour? Yes, the full committee, everybody put their hands up and agreed that this should, we realise that it is not to make a legal decision, but to allow all councillors to have a discussion and a debate on it, that this should actually be debated in full council and then cabinet convene after that full council meeting and make their legal decision. That's the recommendation. Councillor Stevens, you have to remember you don't have to do what we've said, but as long as we all understand that that's it, but it is the recommendation from this committee. I think Councillor Drew's got one other recommendation as well.
Thank you. So this doesn't necessarily flow from that we've just voted on, but I think my principal concern, and going back to the issue of the JR, is the impact of school transport and how the ramifications of that haven't yet been adequately ventilated and I think reflected in the report, good though it is in some respects. So my recommendation, particularly because I think it's a signal issue, and Councillor Critchison has already raised it, I hope she doesn't mind me trespassing on it, but is in relation to the central rural parts of the island, which I think stands at a very significant risk of becoming an educational desert. And one of the big issues there is transport. And I think the problem is when this is essentially a balancing exercise, it comes down to a determination by decision makers, whether that's going to be full council or cabinet or whatever, is the cost benefit on a financial aspect. So my recommendation is that irrespective of what comes out of full council at an indicative vote, that Central Rural has educational provision in some capacity, and that Cabinet perhaps looks at a way of whether that's an amalgamation, whether that's revisiting some of those recommendations, we do so. So that's my proposal.
Add to that I think the Chillerton letter needs to be more heavily weighted in those discussions as well. So if we can actually put that as part of the recommendation, that letter is more heavily weighted than it is at the moment.
And I think if I may through the show on that point, I think it's a well-established matter of public law that when you have a legitimate expectation that you have placed upon something which has been put forward by the council, you may have made financial decisions predicated upon that has significant weight. And I think that again is another head of claim that a JR would potentially proceed upon.
I'll tie up the wording with Mel later because I can feel her going, what was the actual wording of that? Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Councillor Stewart.
Sorry, I have a recommendation.
And so has Councillor Spink. So Councillor Stewart, your recommendation.
Okay. We may agree, it's not unknown, that the committee consider that the case for closure is flawed due to the problems with unspecified weighted criteria, a detailed decision matrix and lack of information on the whole primary school estate, and that the Cabinet postpone a full consideration until it is satisfied that a reconsideration of the whole primary school estate has taken place and that criteria for changes within a school place plan are agreed and shared with all interested parties. And just to add to that, Councillor Bacon wasn't listening to what I said. What I said was the original purpose of what I tried to do was to say that the criteria were to be considered and set up by a whole stakeholder involvement, which means they would all be involved in setting up the criteria before you choose the schools, which means that basically everybody's bought in before you have to make decisions. So it is not later on, it was beforehand. Anyway, sorry. So that's a recommendation. Ignore what I said at the end. That's not the recommendation.
I think that would all be covered if we went to a full council debate in January. Do you not feel that criteria and everything could be looked at before then? My feeling would be, and it's only my recommendation back to you as chair, is we understand that schools do have to close. We do understand that there is a process that has to happen and that delay is actually detrimental to the children of this island. But what we want to do is all feel that we are part of that process and inputting to that process and have a level of time to understand the criteria and how we've got to that point. So I would feel that was going to give even more delay than is necessary if we were going back to that feels a bit like going back to square one, which I don't want to do, but I can ask the committee to vote on that recommendation. They're really happy with that. I would. Councillor Bacon.
I apologise for my misunderstanding of the question. If I had properly understood it, so I do apologise. I think I would have said that we know throughout this process much has been driven forward in terms of requests for action by governors, head teachers and the head teachers forum. But I think it is fair to say that they have said that the process is for the politicians and they have not wished to be part of the formal process. They have merely said that a process should take place. And so I do wonder, therefore, whether there is a flaw in what you suggest in that those key stakeholders have this iteration of the process specifically said, it is not for us, it is for you. It's for us to demand a process. It is for you to create and follow that process.
Can I also give a reminder to everyone listening in the public gallery, these are recommendations to Cabinet. They will discuss this on Thursday, the recommendations from this committee.
Chair, thank you for that suggestion. I think that's probably reasonable. I think trying to put too much upon the cabinet at this stage would be unfair.
To be fair, I'm not in the interest of fairness. I'm interested in a good primary education, what's going to be the right decision at the end of the day. Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. There's been reference to legal advice, and that's been relied upon to show that the consultation has been properly and fairly carried out. If that's being relied upon, then there's a general rule of law that if you rely upon a document, it should be disclosed. So will corporate scrutiny recommend, please, that legal advice regarding the fairness of the consultation that has been referred to in the course of this meeting be disclosed? And I would suggest to all members, bearing that in mind that our recommendation is that this should be a matter considered at a full council meeting. The second recommendation I'd like to make is that it does seem to me that a lot of the decision making has been because of the stance of academies, in that we're not able to close academies or reduce their PAN, published admission numbers, without consent. But there is Department of Education guidance that they are expected to act reasonably, the academies. And I'd like to see any papers, please, that show that the reasonableness of that has been considered by this local authority in taking its decisions thus far. So those are my two recommendations, please.
I don't know if there's so much recommendations as questions.
Well, they're recommendations, Chair, because I don't believe, unless we recommend it, we'll see any of it at full council.
Well, firstly, Cabinet don't have to take this to full council. We are only recommending that it takes it to full council. That's just a recommendation. They could tell us to go, whatever. Probably not a legal argument, is it? Whatever. I also feel that these are questions that could have come up during the meeting rather than a recommendation at the end.
I would have asked them.
Councillor Spink.
Time, Chair.
Councillor Spink.
No, I'm just answering your point. Why didn't I ask the question?
Okay.
The answer is because we ran out of time to enable Councillor Brodie to leave. I don't take complaint at that, but to now suggest that I should have raised it when you would have said I've had said enough seems to me unreasonable, I'm afraid, Chair. And I do think these recommendations should go to the vote.
Okay, I'm quite happy for them to go to the vote, but I think all we need is an undertaking from Cabinet to send the documents regarding the process. We have actually, when we did kick up a bit of a fuss, but actually we did, as corporate scrutiny, get copies of all of these huge information.
I don't think the legal advice in there. I mean, there may be because there's a lot of documents, but I don't think the legal advice has been disclosed. And I don't think there's any detailed consideration of whether the Academy's response is reasonable.
Councillor Bacon.
I make no comment on the legal advice. I note what Councillor Spink says, but in relation to the second point, I would refer him, and would have done if the question had been asked earlier, to Appendix 24, which is the DFE Regional Director letter, which addresses the issue he is asking about.
Well, I would have to check. I think I've read that in the lot of papers that have been disclosed and didn't feel that it really went far enough. But I'll look at that, and if I don't think it goes far enough, I'll raise it either at Cabinet on Thursday, or if our recommendation is conceded at Cabinet on Thursday that we've already voted on, I'll raise it at full council. But I don't think you are suggesting that you've disclosed the legal advice, are you, Councillor Bacon?
I said I make no comment on that.
I'd like to know whether it's in the
Spink,
bundle.
you do have to go through the chair.
Chair, I'd like to know whether it's in the bundle. I can't find it. Is that my oversight, or have you haven't you disclosed it?
I have not disclosed it. It has not been disclosed in the bundle. It is ongoing.
So, my feeling on this is the first two proposals were very strong and was something that is really worth consideration to go to Cabinet. I think if we give too many recommendations to Cabinet on Thursday, actually are two very strong recommendations, which is one to go to full council and the other to look at the rural area of schools again, will be watered down by doing many other recommendations. We could get the Councillor Jordan to actually quite happily say to us if there is legal advice so far for those members that are interested in it, you would be able to send that to us because it is a document that maybe you agree could be sent to all members rather than us having to do a recommendation. You know, we are in a democratic society, as you know.
In principle, it, eh?
We're out here, so.
I realise that. I realise that, Chair. In principle, it's not a problem. There is not an attempt, never has been, to withhold information. This is one of the most difficult decisions that we've had to make as a council. All I would need is assurance that whatever specific document is being asked for, we are possible to share. That may mean with reductions, or I'm not, I would need further advice about that. The principle, Chair, yes.
So you're committed to the principle of sharing the legal representation to
Chair, I'm committed to the principle of you understanding all of the information that's needed.
Yeah, Councillor Jordan, my point is I don't want the recommendations that we've made being watered down by lots of other recommendations that could actually just be commitments.
Chair.
Mr. Whitaker.
Have an input on the legal advice point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just say that essentially the documentation, the key components, the key elements of the documentation provided in the pack, such as the reports for each school, for example, have been produced in collaboration both with in-house legal and external counsel, and they have provided feedback on them on an ongoing basis. And that has been the input of legal, and that is why we believe that they are fit for purpose. So it's not the case that a specific, piece of advice exists where external counsel has said we confirm that, etc., etc. It's the fact that they've been involved with us on an ongoing basis to provide advice and guidance throughout the whole process to make sure that we are adhering to our statutory duties. And that's why we believe that the process and the documentation provided is in line with our statutory duties and therefore fit for purpose.
Councillor Spink, are you happy with that response?
I think happy might be
okay,
pushing it a little bit.
Like semi-happy, bordering on a little bit of a grin?
If there is no, as it were, I had understood from the way that the question was answered earlier that there was a specific legal advice. If there isn't a specific legal advice, it's simply ongoing, then I suppose it's going to be very difficult to disclose. It rather puts me in a difficult position, because if you, in the course of a meeting like this, rely on legal advice, it's a reasonable question to ask to see it, but I don't want to put the officers to huge number of email trails. But if there is one document or just a few emails to justify it, I'd like to see them, please.
Okay, Mr. Whitaker is nodding away, and if there is anything regarding judicial reviews or anything like advice that's been given, then that will be given to those requested. Don't send it to me, I won't read it. Just saying. I won't. I've got so much to read at the moment. Have you seen all this that we've still been wading through for days and days and days? I think we've committed to that if a councillor asks a specific question regarding judicial review and legal advice, unless there is specific reasons, which we can't see why there would be, that can be provided to the councillors when questioned. Is that okay? Potentially, just to send that to corporate scrutiny. Is that okay? We're happy with that. I think that brings us to the end of this section. Councillor Jarman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm at something of a disadvantage here because, in common with what I believe is probably half of the elected members of this authority, I've not been given full access to all the papers on this topic, despite multiple questions today. I've actually been put to task at length today by the monitoring officer being asked to justify why I wanted access to those papers. I find that wholly undemocratic and unsatisfactory. On the monitoring officer's documents which have been circulated, it may be worth the committee realising that his answer was given in absence of the question. So although we have his initial answer, we don't have the question that was asked to which he is referring. The second thing to note is that his answer was delayed circulation for a full 26 hours to the members of this committee, such that it was only disclosed to the committee 3 hours before the meeting. The third thing to note is that I have gone back to him today with a number of questions querying his remarks, specifically that the case he cites relates to an authority operating under a different remit and relates to the actions of a mayor, which we do not have. So I would ask that any further information on that topic also be disclosed to this committee, and indeed that all the papers on this topic now be released to all members so that they can prepare for the cabinet meeting on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you. That is noted. Right, we do have, so that's where we come to an end of this part of the meeting, but we are going on to the next part of the cabinet agenda, which is on the island poverty reduction strategy. If you'd like to all sit through that next part of the meeting and then a motion that's coming to that meeting, you are most welcome to. But if I were you, I'd go save yourselves. It won't be offended if you leave, basically. I would. Yeah, just giving you a couple of minutes, but if you want to stay till the end of the meeting, you are most welcome to. For Laura Gordian, because this is like her part of the paper. I think she's gone. Councillor Jordan, as you're the only one sat there at the moment, would you like to discuss with us the island poverty reduction strategy? Go on then, go for it. Right, let's go back to the agenda of the meeting. I've been politely reminded that we do actually have to go and say that there are no general exception decisions and no urgent decisions. The progress update, pages 11 to 12. So I know that the progress update will be on the speed review. That's Councillor Jordan's favourite thing to discuss, is actually coming to Cabinet in January. It is. I've seen your agenda, Councillor Jordan.
Sorry, Chair, I will shake my head about it's not my favourite item coming. That's what I mean. It is coming in January, yes.
Yes, the speed review is coming in January, and January 2025.
The speed review.
Yeah, none of us are holding our breath for it.
Quickly.
Committee's work plan 30 and the forward plan 13 to 26 and the work programme 27 to 28. Does any councillor have any comments? Most of these items will be going, I discussed the agenda for January, because the cabinet agenda is quite heavy for January, and this committee will being that critical friend, I haven't put anything extra on to the January's committee meeting. I think there is enough because we've got the public health discussions, we've got the speed review. There's lots of quite meaty stuff in the cabinet agenda that we will need to discuss. I haven't put anything else on to the January agenda, and a budget update there will be. Said that. Yeah, that is definitely enough for January, isn't it? I think we all agree on that. So review of the cabinet agenda. We only have one more item on the cabinet agenda because it was a special cabinet agenda, which is the island poverty. Oh, you've got the TRO review for Shelfleet.
It's a small localised issue, Chair, and there would be amendments to that due to new information coming from the parish council.
And an update on your poverty reduction strategy, please. Oh, go on.
I've met with the parish council. I realised the local opinion about the proposals, Chair, and we've taken that into account. I'm sure the parish council and the community and residents won't be disappointed.
Now you've gone back to the TRO, haven't you?
So it is a TRO.
Yeah. I've moved on from that. We've moved on to the island poverty reduction strategy.
Sorry, I heard Shelfleet. I'm happy.
You're still in Shelfleet. Drive over this direction.
I still got the speed review in my head, Chair. Look, Chair, in the absence of the cabinet member and the director, I'll have a go at presenting this, but you've got the document in front of you. I guess the first thing to tell you is that this is not an Isle of Wight Council document. This is an island document created as a policy for stakeholders and support across the island, not just the Isle of Wight Council. It's got three key priorities and they're listed page 18 of the document. So targeting support for island residents experience poverty. It's to support island residents to help prevent them falling in poverty. Prevention is a key part of this document, and ensure long-term support is planned. And you'll see through the priorities that what we're doing, it's listed in there. What are we doing now? I'll come to the director in a moment. And how we're going to deliver that, Chair, and how we're going to measure that when we've delivered it or as we deliver it. The director has arrived and has been...
I've never seen you relieved to see a director arrive before, like, phew. Oh, thank goodness.
I have been briefed on this document, but...
Thank you, Laura.
I think the key point for your committee, Chair, is that the director has been heavily involved with this document from the outset and is far more cited than I am on detail. And as a committee, you may be better to hear some of that detail rather than my broader comments on it.
Thank you, but not too much detail.
Forgive me, Chair. I'm afraid I'm not quite sure what the question was, having not been here at the start. Okay, so in terms of the poverty reduction strategy, it's a strategy that's been co-produced with multiple parts of our health, social care and wider system. The intention is that the strategy is owned by the Isle of Wight rather than by the Isle of Wight Council. What we know about poverty is that the challenge is one that affects so many parts of our wider community. For the local authority to try and use the limited levers available to it to resolve that issue that affects our wider community is something that would simply be beyond the scope of the local authority. The strategy has been developed to be ambitious, based on the feedback from local people and the people who support them in our communities, and will be underpinned by a robust delivery strategy. The delivery plan that will sit under the poverty reduction strategy will be the document that outlines who's doing what to solve what. It's really the nuts and bolts of the position and what will enable us as a local authority to work with our wider system partners to ensure that what we're doing is delivering a reduction in poverty for all of the island's residents. You'll see from the strategy there are key elements throughout that highlight and indicate exactly what local people wanted and needed in terms of this strategy. Their voice is very, very clear from the information that's provided, and it's on the basis of the representations that they made, the information they shared, and the time they took to tell us what was really important to them that the strategy's been developed. It doesn't necessarily reflect that which we thought people would tell us. It reflects exactly what people have told us, which I think is possibly a significant shift in terms of strategies we've had for the Isle of Wight across the recent past. I'm happy to take any questions in relation to the strategy, should you have any. And I'd just simply like to express my thanks to the team led by Ian Lloyd, who has done the work to develop this strategy in partnership. Ian knows that the real work starts now. We've got a strategy that hopefully will be signed off. It will be about implementation.
Thank you. Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. Laura, thank you for that. There was a number of recommendations made in a meeting with councillors about a month or so ago. Were there any of those recommendations that weren't implemented in this report?
For you, Chair, Councillor Blake, please forgive me, I wasn't present at that meeting. I have seen an overview, and my understanding is that all recommendations were implemented. Similarly, at the Policy and Scrutiny Committee for Health and Social Care earlier this month, a number of recommendations were made and they have also been implemented. We're grateful to Councillor Redrup as chair of that committee for highlighting some work that we're able to take forward with victims of domestic abuse, which is hugely important and will be incredibly beneficial to the strategy moving forward. Any recommendations that have been made, we've attempted to adopt as best we possibly can. It will only be where the recommendations directly contradict the information that our community has given us that we will have potentially not implemented those. What I can do for you, Councillor Baker, is get confirmation from the officers involved in the drafting that all of those recommendations have been incorporated.
Councillor Jordan.
I can't add much more to that, other than I'm assured that all those recommendations were made. One in particular I recall, I was at the meeting, was on images within the document. The original document showed some quite glossy, good-looking images of the Isle of Wight, and we felt that perhaps that wasn't the best image for a poverty reduction strategy document, and those changes to those images have been made to better reflect the purpose of the document. And just finally, Chair, thank you for your indulgence. It's a living document. It's not a piece of work that is set and you agree, disagree, or make comments about. It will evolve and live its own life as we move forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does Councillor Critchson?
Yeah, my question really was about that really. Well, is this an ongoing process? Because I found in the communities there's sometimes a lack of realisation of the poverty or a denial of the poverty, and I think this strategy will bring some of those issues to the forefront, and hopefully we, and I say, as you said, it is a living document, that it is an ongoing process, and that, you know, communities will be able to feed back into that through the actual implementation of it. So thank you.
Everyone agrees. Are we happy? No more questions on the poverty strategy? No? Okay, we come to the point of the meeting where there has been a motion submitted by Councillor Peter Spink. Did the monitoring officer have any was this fine that we can just read this motion? That's fine. Councillor Spink, would you like to read your motion and then seek for a seconder?
Certainly. I mean, in the interest of time, I won't read it all out. Hopefully, members of the committee have had a chance to read it themselves. It's basically asking for information to enable the any member or group of members to have financial information which will enable them, should they wish, to either make amendments to the budget or to the proposed budget, or indeed put forward an alternative budget. So that's the motion, that we should have those that information and that assistance from officers. I'll speak to it, if I may, very briefly, once, if it is going to be seconded, once it's seconded, but I propose that motion. We'll read it out in full if anyone wishes, but that, I hope, is an accurate summary. So I propose it.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. I would just like to say, with this motion, I certainly won't be seconding it. I have repeatedly said that when I was a cabinet member, we had star chambers, we did lots of stuff with setting budgets, etc. But in the 4 years I was a cabinet member, I don't remember any other political party having any problem with doing an alternative budget proposal, or having worked with the monitoring officer, they would go to the finance officer with a specific idea, and the finance officer would give them that time to work with them. I won't second this because I actually think this gives a really overworked council officers even more work to do, because actually we should just go with a budget amendment. I don't know that I've never had a political group who had a very specific budget amendment not have the finance officer work with them. Actually, in the 4 years before I became an opposition, I would listen to Councillor Garrett and people like that who would thank the finance director for the amount of time, and Councillor Brodie would come up with stuff that was worked on those amendments. I can't second this because I feel it's just going to take up even more time with council officers. And actually, from May 2025, all of this is going to go to Finance Committee and will be open and public and be discussed anyway. So I won't be seconding it, but that is my reasons why, because I think on specific budget amendments, we don't actually get refused information, and we do get the time given. Councillor Jarman, not a member of this committee, so committee first, please. Councillor Drew.
Thank you, Chair. I am happy to second this, somewhat mischievously perhaps. I had been, as it were, in a friendly fashion, somewhat doorstepped by Councillor Spink. I hadn't had the chance to examine it until actually quite recently. But the reason I'm going to second it is this, which is that I think in a democratic process where there are individual councillors who perhaps don't have that structure of support around them. And I know that Councillor Brodie has expressed on previous occasions that he doesn't have access necessarily to the type of communal and community support that we would within a group. And I think it's clearly a very complex area. I think I take your points, and I do agree that the load on very overworked council officers is a concern, but ultimately corporate scrutiny is here to make recommendations and to debate points, and I think it's something that Cabinet could perhaps take into consideration, and I think certainly perhaps a brief debate within this committee would be helpful.
I think you have to remember, this is really rare that a motion comes to corporate scrutiny, that this is a motion, that it isn't actually corporate scrutiny giving a recommendation. So I think we need to be very clear on what's the difference between a motion and us making a judgment on a motion than actually just a recommendation from corporate scrutiny to Cabinet.
May I just say something on that? It's my understanding, and the reason it's put as a motion, is that this was the very specific advice of the external auditor at a governance and audit council committee meeting. The auditor, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, but Councillor Jordan was at that meeting, and I've taken the information on trust from him, which I'm sure is accurate, that the advice from the independent auditor was that the members or groups of members have a right to demand this, and to demand it by way of a motion. He said, and that was double checked as I understand it, because it was thought a little unusual, but he was the independent auditor was quite clear about it, that a motion could be made in this respect. And indeed, his advice was that corporate scrutiny, he thought, should make it, that motion, because otherwise it might be the case that people are prevented, members are prevented from putting forward their amendments and or an alternative budget because they don't have the information. So it may be unusual, but it is apparently the advice and clear advice of the independent auditor. And in my respectful submission, it would be a dereliction of corporate scrutiny's duty if it didn't at least consider a motion recommended by the external auditor.
So Councillor Spink,
Yes.
isn't this meant to be a motion that goes to audit and governance? Why is it here at corporate scrutiny?
Because the independent auditor said that the request should be made, or not request, the demand should be made to corporate scrutiny. So we are acting on the...
Specifically to corporate scrutiny?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're acting on the external auditor's advice.
Downer.
Very quickly, Chair, in all the years I've been in here, the First Island Independents produced a full budget and they were in opposition. And that has been repeated throughout the years. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Jordan.
Within this, how this got to this is another matter, but within this, for the help of your committee members, there is an inferred, the words demand, by the way, the first line, the Corporate Scrutiny Committee demands, right? You're not even asking for consideration or reference or recommendation, demands. What's hidden in here is a demand for the privileged information that the administration of this council have in setting its budget that it recommends the full council. That is what's being asked for here. That is impossible for you to do, because privileged information remains privileged information to the administration. You cannot have access to it. That what you're being asked to do here with the word demand, to see that. A cabinet will refuse that demand if you even try to bring it to cabinet. We do not have to share that information, and that's been made very clear and made clear by legal advice from the monitoring officer also over a long period. This has been going on for a year now. By Councillor Jarman and Councillor Spink of the Empowering Islanders group, that are insistent that they see the administration's working data and information on the budget. No, they will not. No, they will. No, they will not.
So everyone through the chair, okay, I get all that. I get that completely. And a motion has been, Councillor Spink.
May I come back on?
Not until I finished.
No.
That's fine. I get all that. And that's why I keep saying, isn't it good that in May 2025, we are going into a committee system? My only question to you, Councillor Jordan, would be, and I get it, and winners and losers, and you get more information, I get all that completely. But what happens to the information that under a cabinet system is confidential and can't be shared, and is in May 2025 suddenly becomes a free-for-all and everyone can see it?
Don't know. You tell me, Chair. I don't know. You know, is in the current system, its privileged information will remain so.
Chair, may I? Because I think it will assist.
Okay, so Councillor Spink, I'm going to say now, we have 7 minutes. I'm in pain. And I am not going to extend this meeting after 8 o'clock. So you've got a few minutes to say your point and then we'll vote on it. Okay?
Okay. Well, I'll try and be as brief as I can, although I do feel that I'm being unnecessarily hurried. And if I may say, Chair, I think it's quite unusual for you to make a comment before a seconder speaks. But there it is. Before a seconder has the right to second. But there it is. The Councillor Jordan is quite wrong as a matter of law. We are not asking for privileged information. That is, we're not asking for the information that the Cabinet discusses. We're not asking for their discussions. Wait, please. I didn't interrupt you. No. That is the preparation materials for us. We're not asking. What we want to receive is any raw materials, so financial data, that is reasonable to set an alternative budget. And what we'd also like to see is the raw data that the Cabinet is given. What we're not asking for and not entitled to is Cabinet comments and Cabinet opinions. That's what's protected. You can't, as it were, if we want to know in setting, we want to know, for example, the income from various things in relation to council tax, you can't deny that disclosure. And that is what has been happening for the last year. So I do put this forward, and I do hope there's a seconder. And furthermore, the word demands was specifically the word that the external auditor recommended. So your advice or your comments, Councillor Jordan, as leader of this council, are directly opposed to the external auditor of your council.
Councillor Drew, as you seconded this, would you like to speak?
Thank you. Yeah, I maintain my seconding of this. I think it is a valid point and ones that Councillor Spink has ventilated. I think it goes to the wider issue that we've discussed previously in Council about the reliance upon privilege and privileged information when there's not necessarily a strong case to put information behind that determination. And I think equally many councillors have expressed a happiness, a desire to sign a confidential agreement to have that disclosed. So I think it's something that I'm happy to stand. Let's go to the votes.
Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm essentially a relevant Cabinet member in terms of legal function. I think it needs to be said that the external auditor, I note what Councillor Spink says, but the external auditor does not have the same duties and responsibilities under the Constitution and in law as the monitoring officer. And in a game of trumps, the monitoring officer wins. I think what Councillor Jordan has pointed out is that there's a problem with the wording of the motion as presented. And my understanding from the legal advice that I know has been issued over time is that what is proposed as it stands, for the reasons Councillor Jordan has set out, would be an illegal motion. I'm troubled that it has actually appeared on the paper in its current form. If it were brought back in a different form, I say I would have thought it would be audit committee rather than corporate scrutiny that would be the appropriate body, then I do not think there would be the issue. But if it were brought back in an appropriate form, it would just actually record what happens now anyway, and what has happened certainly in the 16 years I've been connected with this council, and I reflect there what Councillor Downer has said, that has never been an issue. I'm not sure why it is now. It does seem to be because what is being asked for is material that is privileged in a cabinet system. Whatever happens after May, that's different. But at the moment, that is the law as I understand it in relation to the information. But as I say, I think there's a serious problem here with the motion worded as it is. And I feel this committee may be diving into deep and murky waters if it were to vote in favour of this. And the monitoring officer may have to take formal action.
Thank you for the advice. We need to move to the vote. No, I'm not extending. I did say when this motion came that this was a really important. You can sigh as much as you like, Councillor Spink. You can.
Because I think you're trying to close down something that you don't want to take place, Chair.
Councillor Spink, I said that this was actually a special scrutiny meeting that was taking place because there was a special cabinet meeting on the school place planning, that it was a really important evening, and my focus for this evening would be on the most important issue, which was the schools. I've said that repeatedly, that there would be hardly any time for this motion whatsoever, but you still chose to bring it. You were informed that this would be a really, really busy meeting, and the main priority was the schools. I will close this meeting in 1 minute, so I would move to the vote.
So I will say demands because that was the wording that the auditor suggested. And but I would say demands subject to claims of privilege. So in other words, you can still claim that it's privileged, and there will have to be a report from the monitoring officer, but we are demanding this information subject only to a valid claim. And I propose
Move
to
to
go
the
back
vote.
to the vote.
Raise your hands for for the motion. Against the motion. The motion falls. Good night, everybody. Thank you ever so much for your time.